I decided to make use of this beautiful desk that has been standing here for 1.5 days now, that nobody has made use of so far. Thank you very much for inviting me here for this great congress and for offering the opportunity to share our experiences with you from last year and also the years before. While listening to Pierre Ricci's presentation yesterday, in which he gave us a very interesting overview of the different kinds of participation that we have when it comes to cultural events, I actually realized that the story that I had prepared for today is actually all about the third kind of participation that he spoke about, which is the role of the audience in the co-creation process of cultural events. That's also very interesting if you look at the history of European Capitals of Culture itself. When we look at the start of the initiative in 1985, there was a time when the European Capital of Culture year was actually run as a festival, in which cities, in particular the big cities, organized a year-long festival in which they programmed acts from all over Europe to come to their city. That was followed by a time in which there was a huge focus in cultural infrastructure. So the title was used for building new museums or music halls, which was the case in Wrocław, for example, Poland, European Capital of Culture 2016. And last year, Leeuwarden-Friesland ushered the European Capital of Culture title to actually really focus on the role of the citizens and the role of communities in the creation of a cultural program. That's why in the next 25 minutes that I have, I would like to explain the different strategies that we used in activating the public participation in our cultural events, and also focus on the role that cultural institutions and individual artists played in this process. After that, I will give you a number of examples of projects and the way that artists and cultural organizations work together with citizens in the co-creation process. And thirdly, maybe most interesting, or at least most interesting for me, is to look at what happens if you give communities and citizens the role of cultural producers themselves, and to what kind of events that can lead in a cultural program. But before we delve into that, I need to provide you with a bit of background information on Leeuwarden and on Friesland to outline the context in which this European Capital of Culture year took place. Leeuwarden is the capital of Friesland and is located in the northern part of the Netherlands, as you can see, about 1 hour and 15 minutes from Amsterdam. The city itself has around 110,000 inhabitants, but from the beginning onwards we said that for our program we wanted to use the entire region as a stage, so we wanted to organize events in both the city and the region. And the region of Friesland is a region where in total around 650,000 people live. So it is important to keep in mind when we speak about activating communities, it's about the communities in the city, but also about the villages and the other cities that we have in this region. A region that in particular is very proud of its strong cultural identity, which is best expressed in the Frisian language that is spoken besides the Dutch language in this area, and also about the traditional sports that are practiced here. So public participation, how do you include, or how do you try to include around 650,000 inhabitants in your program? And also very important, how do you include the entire region? The last point, I can be very short about that. There are always a lot of discussions about how do you want to include the regions. We took a very radical choice in that from the beginning onwards we said 50% of the events that we organize take place in the city, and 50% of the events that we take place in other villages and in other cities in the entire region. So we basically see the entire region as a stage that we can use for programming events. When you really want to work with communities and with citizens in a structural way, what is important is that you need to start in time. Audience participation cannot be a superficial layer that you put on top of your program just about when you're about to start with your European Couple of Culture year. For us, this meant that in 2010, so already during the bidding phase, we started with a series of roundtable discussions all around the region, in which we asked artists, cultural organizations, but also from the beginning onwards involved citizens, what kind of city, village and region they would want to live in, and also how the European Capital of Culture year could help achieve their wishes. What is very interesting is that time and time again, all of these stakeholders, citizens, cultural organizations, artists, cultural operators, came up with the same concerns, and these were concerns that all had to do with topics like the loss of biodiversity, urbanization, or the loss of the sense of community. As a foundation, we translated these topics into the 3 themes that form the backbone of our program, and these themes can be summarized by the relationship between nature and culture, the relationship between city and countryside, and a sound balance between community and diversity. So with the input of these roundtable discussions in which the civil society participated from the beginning onwards, we managed to be able to put together a cultural program that adhered to the challenges of this specific context. And I think that's very important, because by doing so you create a program that is locally embedded as well, and it's also a way to create ownership of a cultural program. The subsequent question is how to mold these 3 themes into an artistic concept for a program. And again, we started this quest by discussing with many stakeholders, not only cultural institutions, not politicians, but again, also citizens, what it is that identifies us as a city and as a region. What do we want to put forward in 2018? And for us, this was a sense of community, what we call Meenskip in Frisian. In our region, when we look back, we can see that we have a very long history of solving problems together, by working together. This can already be traced back to when we had to build artificial hills in the landscape to keep our feet dry from the incoming water from the sea. However, there's also a darker side to community sense, to the sense of Meenskip, and that is that working together often means working together with exactly someone who is the same as you are. So we said we want to use the European Capital of Culture title to create an open Meenskip, an open community, a community in which you work together with people that are different from yourself as well. How to do this? Well, we said we will do this by taking a step back ourselves as an organization, and by inviting cultural artists, organizations, producers, operators to develop projects that are inspired on one of these 3 themes. And very important, by involving citizens in the development phase of these projects as well. So in sum, we can say that what we have is a program that adheres to the challenges of this region, and a theme that puts together the sense of community to the fore. Summarized as the theoretical framework of our European Capital of Culture project. But then, of course, the most interesting thing is to see how does this work out in practice. In what way were communities and citizens really involved in the program and in creating the program? I want to make that assessment by looking at a number of projects that we organized last year. And most of them stem from the bid book, so it's very interesting to also see how were they developed within the years in between winning the title and organizing the event. The first project that I want to speak about is the 11 Fountains project. Friesland consists of 11 cities that are all connected by water, and that are most famous for the 11 City Skating Tour, because each year when temperatures drop below 0, the entire Netherlands gets crazy, starts looking at the region and asks itself, will it happen this year? Will this 11 City Skating Tour, a tour which is longer than 200 kilometers, take place or not? Due to climate change, the last time that this tour took place was over 20 years ago. So a cultural operator from Amsterdam, Anne Tilrook, came up with the fantastic idea to invite 11 renowned artists from all over the world to design a fountain for each of these cities, and by doing so create a new connection between the cities, to create a cultural root in the area. To involve the communities in the city, what she did was set up so-called fountain committees in each of these cities. And in these fountain committees involve citizens to place, shop owners to place, restaurant owners to place. And together with the curator, they looked at the history of the city, they looked at the tales of the city, of the traditions of the city. And based upon these tales, together with the curator, they looked at what kind of artists they could invite for this project. What was the kind of artist that had a good match with the city itself? Subsequently, together with the curator, they wrote a letter and they invited the artists to come to the city for a study visit. And it was the fountain committee that actually led the artists around, that told them about the city. It was also the fountain committee that organized an information evening for the rest of the community, in which they gave the artists the opportunity to discuss with the inhabitants what kind of fountain the city would, the community would want to have in the city. It was also the fountain committee itself that together with the artists looked for the perfect space in the city to create this fountain. So what we see here, for example, is Shinji Omaki, artist from Tokyo, Japan, together with local inhabitants taking a boat ride through the city of Aalst to see what kind of fountain the city of Aalst would want to have. In the end, it has led to 11 fountains being opened on the 18th of May last year. We see here the fountain in Leeuwarden, Mohamed Plensa from Spain. We see here the fountain of Johan Creighton in the city of Bolsward. Another project from a completely different end of the spectrum is the Potatoes Go Wild project. I think maybe that best illustrates the way in which we were open for projects from civil society as well. In the bidding phase, a farmer's wife came up to us and asked us if we were aware of the 117 years old trade route that there was with Malta, that was had the opportunity to organize the other European Capital of Culture in 2018. Because each year the first potato seeds grown by the farmers community in our region are shipped to Malta and being planted there. And the following March, the potatoes are being shipped back to the Netherlands, where they're sold on the market as the Maltese potatoes. And on top of that, Malta and Fryzija are both official bilingual and have a wealth of modern and classic poetry. So for this farmer's wife, this was the reason to set up a literary poetry project. She started by asking Frisian poets to write poems about the potatoes in Friesland. These poems were translated into English and were attached to potato sacks that were being sent to Malta. And in Malta she had made contact with a literary magazine that invited Maltese poets to write poetry about the Maltese potatoes that were being translated into Dutch and were attached to the potato sacks that were being shipped back to the Netherlands again. She started as one farmer. In the end, she organized weekly meetings with all the farmers in the region, and this was just a start of the project. They also developed a theater play that took place in the fields in this region, and they concluded the year by international big potato art exhibition. And for the real art lovers, you of course recognize the painting The Potato Eaters from Vincent van Gogh. Another very interesting bottom-up initiative is the King of the Meadows project. It's a project that involves citizens, artists, academics and the birdwatching community that are very concerned about the loss of biodiversity in our region. This project addresses this topic by looking at the black-tailed godwit bird. This is a bird that is seen typical for our region. It's in our region every year in spring. it lays its eggs in the region, waits for the eggs to hatch, and then flies back to the southern part of Europe and to Africa again. But due to the way that we use our fields for mass agricultural industry, the time that the bird spends in our region becomes less and less, because there's simply not enough food for the bird anymore. This does not only affect our region, but also regions along the flying route of the bird. Because the bird leaves our region earlier, it also means that it arrives in Africa earlier again, where it destroys the rice harvest, leading to farmers emigrating to Europe again. So then you have the circle complete. What this group of artists, the birdwatching community and involved citizens did was set up cultural projects that they organized in Friesland, but also along the flying route of this godwit bird. So they organized a theater play that you see here. They worked together with brass bands in the villages along the flying route of the bird. But they also created a landscape experience in which you could enjoy the landscape, sleep in the landscape, listen to poetry in the landscape for over 12 hours. Another example of a project that took place outside of Leeuwarden is the project Lost in the Greenhouse. Lost in the Greenhouse is a beautiful music theater production that took place in the greenhouses that are located in one of the villages close to the city of Leeuwarden. Whereas in the past, all the people working in these greenhouses came from the villages itself, we've seen that in recent years, many people from Poland came to work in these greenhouses. Operator, a Dutch theater company, did in-depth research of what that meant for these different communities. What did it mean for the communities in these villages, but also what did it mean for the communities in Poland, just to have people leaving these cities in Poland and working in Western Europe. And based upon all the stories of these citizens, they created a music theater production called Lost in the Greenhouse. It was actually performed in the greenhouses itself, in which professional local Dutch and Polish actors played together with musical support by local brass bands again. Under the Tower is perhaps the project that best exemplifies our concept of evenminskap. Friesland boasts about 770 churches with just as many stories. A small team of 3 professionals invited communities living around these churches to submit stories that have taken place around these churches in the past. And out of 80 applications they selected 32 villages, and with a professional team of artists and cultural producers, each of these 32 villages got the opportunity to translate these stories into an art manifestation. And the result was an amazing program that contained all aspects of our concept of evenminskap. The participations of citizens working together with cultural professionals, telling a story and working together with other churches in Europe. The picture that you see here is, for example, of the production The Holy Deer of Cambuur. Cambuur is our local football club, and together with the community of the village, but also the football community, this theater play looked at the links between roots, religion and football. This is just some of the example projects that were already there in the bidding phase, from the beginning onwards. But we also said that we wanted to set money aside for projects that came from smaller cultural organizations, individual artists, and very important, also from citizens themselves. Because we said a cultural professional for us, a cultural producer for us, is anyone who has the wish to develop a cultural project. It doesn't matter if you are a museum and you have had 30 or 40 years of experience of organizing exhibitions. Also, if you're, for example, a farmer's wife, you're welcome to our program. To support this program, we set up a special meeting room in Leeuwarden where people could come and discuss their project proposal, and also discuss with us as a program team how they could develop their idea into a project. And what we were faced with most often were that people came to our office and said, we have a great idea for you, but we said, but we're not going to produce it. We're there to help you to produce this event, to literally put the citizens in the role of the producer. What we also did was organize workshops throughout the entire region in which we brought all these citizens' initiatives together, and in an intensive program that we organized, helped people from idea to real project. So you have an idea, how do you make a project description, how do you make a budget, what are the funds you can ask for, what are the permits you have to ask for. We looked at the entire process of creating a cultural project. To what kind of projects did that lead? Well, first of all, we had two ladies that came to our office in 2015, and they said, we have a great idea. We want to break, I have to say, the Guinness Book of Records of the biggest crotcheted blanket in the world. They started with one blanket themselves and invited citizens from the city and the region to join in. Soon already the entire country joined in. People went on cruise ships, and they asked people that were on the cruise ship as well to join in. So in the end what we had were over 10,000 blankets from 50 different countries, and when you put them all together, this is what it looks like. Another interesting initiative is cultural dorp De Hoeve. De Hoeve is one of the villages in our region, and after winning the European Capital of Culture title, they declared themselves as the European Village of Culture. And together with the citizens in the village, they actually made their own bid book, which was based upon the bid book that we had submitted, and developed a cultural program that was completely in line with our concept, with our topics as well. So it was actually a very interesting spin-off of the European Capital of Culture year. What was maybe even more interesting is that there was a spin-off of the European Village of Culture as well, again in one of the other villages, that started to organize their European Street of Culture, in which they organized poetry events that took place in a snack bar, for example, because engaging with audience is also to look for audience in new places where you would normally not find them, such as in a snack bar. Now that the European Capital of Culture year is over, we can look back, and we can ask ourselves the question, is what we envisioned 8 years ago, did it become reality or not? Did we manage to organize a European Capital of Culture year that didn't only embrace the local community, but that also put the open sense of community to the fore, and that it really involved citizens in the creation process of cultural events? And I would answer that question affirmative. If we look at the numbers, John, my colleague, already showed you some of them yesterday as well. We managed to put together a main program of 60 events. On top of that, we had another 400 events that were organized by citizens and smaller cultural organizations themselves. And I feel that is also reflected in the impact that the European Capital of Culture had, in the sense that almost 70% of the citizens felt involved in the cultural program. But in the end, what is most important is that it's not about these numbers, however great they are. It's about experiences that you can offer. It's about the experience of a young girl growing up in one of the poorer districts of the city, who gets the opportunity to film her life, to show other people what her life is like, and that her life is actually not as bad as what newspapers portray or what researchers portray. It's about citizens getting the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to work together with an artist from Japan to create a work of art that will be there as part of our legacy program as well. And maybe the example I like best about young people from the Senegal community who organized their own Senegal week together with restaurants in the city, who for the first time felt visible. They really came to our office and said, thank you for giving us the opportunity. Said, no, you have to thank yourself for creating this project, and showing us that your community is also part of the city life. It's all about offering these experiences that enrich and increase the impact that the European Capital of Culture, of course, has, but also that arts and culture have always had and always will continue to have on our society as well. Thank you very much.